Yes, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Chopping It Up with Charms. I'm back here again, and what we're doing, it's not FPL this week. No, well, not till the very end, but I'm going to be going over everything Premier League, everything that we missed in the last week, everything we've got coming up, and we're just going to hash straight through it. So before we get into it, don't forget to give us your like, don't forget to communicate with a little conversation, and don't forget to subscribe to the Two Bluesy. Now let's get straight to work. Let's start off with what we want to talk about, Chelsea, and I won't lie, it's probably the most anticlimactic performance I've seen from Chelsea in a very long time. You know, we've gone 18, 19 games, losing 2 of them. Both of them, we had 10 men on the pitch. Both of them, Nicholas Jackson got sent off. And I felt like we had got rid of that problem. Going into the Premier League, I was very confident that we were going to be able to essentially dominate from day one. And it might be a little bit of bias, probably a lot of bias, to be totally honest. But I thought Crystal Palace were a team that right now we would get the better of. I was wrong, but I think that in hindsight, I think you can look at it and you can understand the result. I feel like Crystal Palace are a constantly underrated side. Obviously, we saw the way that they beat Liverpool or held Liverpool to a draw, ended up beating them on penalties in the Community Shield. Got a bit more silverware. You know, we saw them go all the way to the final stages and win the FA Cup last season. We know how good they can be. And obviously, they've got some great players like Eze. Obviously, he's gone now. He's gone to Arsenal. So I do wish that had happened a week ago, to be totally honest. So he wouldn't have been able to be there and score. You know, I'm not going to act like they didn't bag against us. A fantastic free kick, by the way. A little bit 50-50 on the decision to have that expunged. And by 50-50 is, I mean, I didn't know that was a rule, to be totally honest. I was very surprised by the decision, but I'll take it. I thought going forward, Chelsea looked a little bit toothless, a little bit leggy. Obviously, playing the amount of games that we have played, I feel like it's maybe taking a bit more of a toll on us than I would have expected it to. I wasn't expecting us to look as, lacking the energy that I expected, the impetus, as Dan might call it, from this Chelsea side. I was expecting a lot more for us. Joao Pedro particularly, I thought was quite absent. And unfortunately, Cole Palmer, you know, the one criticism I do give to Enzo Maresca, tactically, is I think that we've got to adjust and put Palmer on the left. I do, you know, I know that we've got a lot of fantastic wide players, and I know that he is sort of our creative 10, but end of the day, whenever he plays off of the left, he's able to cut in onto his right foot and put in an early ball, or even on the right and he cuts in on his left and shoot. You know, that's how I thought he was the most progressive in the Club World Cup final, which is probably the best game of football I've seen from Chelsea for a very long time. Every time he was going down that right flank, all 3 of his goals came, both his goals and his assists came from that right channel where he pushes it down, goes in left, and either cuts in with a fake shot and then shoot, or he cuts in and then plays that little ball over the top of Joao Pedro. And defensively, you know, it is what it is. It was relatively sound, not too many calamitous mistakes. Not any, to be totally honest, but for me, yeah, the problem is how we look going forward. It was nowhere near as sharp as I was expecting it to. And I really do hope that we can sink our teeth into a lot more victories, because I do think like a lot of the teams this season, they look very strong, you know, and although maybe right now there is a bit of an adjustment phase, particularly from the bigger teams, a lot of the teams that you might not have expected have been very progressive playing football, you know, look really sharp. But I've called it, you know, I have called a couple of these teams, particularly, you know, the next team we'll talk about is Sunderland. You know, if you watch that Sunderland West Ham game and all you took from it was West Ham look off it, I think you're deliberately hiding something, because, you know, I know a lot of Mackhams, if you will. I know a lot of people who support Sunderland, and I think that they're very excited for this season, and I can understand why now. Obviously, certain players that they've got, like a Dingra and a couple of these other newer players, are going to be leaving in January for the AFCON, which is something I've flagged up in our latest video predicting the Premier League table. But I think if they can hold on till January and keep in the top half, I think they're more than safe. And I think that when you look at their result against West Ham, the way that they were winning every aerial duel is very, very Premier League. It was very astute and I don't want to use the word professional, but it just felt like a confident performance, and it felt like a team that went and what? We're here, and what you're going to do about it. And as much as I have to talk positives about Sunderland, because there is nothing more so far to talk about other than the positives, even though they, some of their young players like Enzo Lefebvre didn't even get on the pitch, they weren't even be able to flaunt what they had. It is a really bad tell for West Ham, which is the next team I want to talk about. I don't have a clue what's going on there. For a team like West Ham, the stadium they've got, the support they've got, they should be performing substantially better than this. If they were to lose a player like Jared Bowen, I think that you would have to pin them for relegation. It's at that level of bad now. I couldn't name you anyone else who they've got going forward particularly. I mean, defensively, it is worrying regardless. But going forward, when it comes to scoring goals, it almost feels like the system which Graham Potter is trying to play is you score one, we'll score two. But if you take Jared Bowen out that team, it does feel like you score one, we'll try our best to score two. And I don't like that for them. And being a football fan, I think West Ham is a team that the Premier League needs to do well. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say that they've really won anything ever, to be totally honest. But they are a great Premier League side to go out there and watch. And they're always a hard game. Obviously, even from back when they were at the Boiling, they've always been a hard team to go break down. And, they've gone relatively far in Europe in the past. And they've even got into those European places. And I don't want to see them get dropped. But I do think that it is a lot more on the cards than maybe I realised. This was something that Dan pointed out. And I was a little bit more comfortable with the idea that they just about have enough, particularly putting my chips in with Bowen. I mean, hell, Bowen's in my FPL team. But yeah, I just can't see it for them. I find it very difficult to kind of watch that performance and be excited. One team that, has been very obviously exciting is Man City. I feel like Tijani Reinders was a fantastic signing. It might have just been a great game. And the guy's a lot older than I thought he was. He's 27, he's in his prime right now. He looks like he's really ready to make all of those attacking actions tick. And he was very, very, very effective going forward. And that was not something I had expected, not necessarily replacing De Bruyne, but adding in that, what they lost in De Bruyne, which was those progressive passes, that sort of tenacity going forward. And from the one game that they've played so far this season, I think it's one game that he's actually played or started to Tijani Reinders. And I was very, very impressed overall. The other team that I want to talk about is Liverpool. It's difficult to not look at that Liverpool side and think that they've got a pretty rampant chance of winning the league, particularly with Chelsea dropping 2 points first thing off to Crystal Palace. Once again, great team and very similar result to Liverpool and Palace, but when they played against each other. But just going forward, it didn't feel like we had that vim about us. And they did, especially against a team like Bournemouth, who are a hard team to break down. Great season last season. They're fully rested, really ready to come in there. And obviously going 2-0 up and then letting Semenyo back twice is a difficult thing mentally to adjust to. But Ekitike, I think, is fantastic. And the way that those last two goals towards the end of the game in the dying embers, even Salah's goal, the way that the team were linking up and playing ball, it felt after that 78th minute, 79th minute, that something was happening, and boom, boom, just back, and then 10-minute bang, and then just constant outpour. And then when they figured out the way that Semenyo was running that channel, blocked it off. And although I do have to call in a little bit of criticism towards Jeremy Frimpong, I think that I was a little bit too... I was emphasising that he is a better defender than people were originally trying to tell me he was. I thought that I had seen a lot more for him defensively. I didn't really get that from his game against Bournemouth. I did feel like he was just getting exposed regularly. But then by the time he had figured it out and came in, pretty sure he got taken off. And after that, and there's not much you can say about it. But I want to see a bit more from Jeremy Frimpong. I think going forward, it is a good look, but you've got to do more than that if you're playing a back four. And then finally, just while we get into game week 2, I just want to talk a quick bit about FPL. I think Sunderland are going to have a great week against Burnley. It's a very easy fixture for them. Obviously, if there is a game Burnley are going to win this season, it would probably be this one, because it's also their easiest game in a lot of respects, based on the fact that they played each other in the last season twice. And I just think that this is Sunderland's time to really go out there and grab these points. So I think that a player like Ronaldo, I think 4.5 million at centre back, great shout. Daniel Ballard, obviously getting the 17 points last week, and I don't think he's going to repeat the heroics, but he showed that he is an aerial threat. You know, he beats these bigger centre backs to the ball with, you know, he's a very physical player. But hopefully, I think that this will be a good time for Enzo Lefebvre to start. You know, I think that if you're going to wean him into the Premier League, this is a good time for it. And a lot of people won't really be looking at it like that because it's hard to put a player into your team that didn't start the game prior. But I think that if there is ever a time where he's going to start weaning into the Premier League, this is a great time for it to happen. It's such a young, dynamic player playing against a team that he's broken down recently, and I think that he'll be able to go out there and do it. Also previously mentioned Dingra, he probably going to have a great game. I just feel like this is a good week if that you are 50-50 on a couple of players in your squad. You're Jared Bowen, so this is a time where you put in one of those Sunderland players. I will say avoid Isidore. Personally, I just don't think that he is a fantastic football player or really a good football player. I thought the goal he scored was pretty generous. I think it was just a bit bad goalkeeping, to be totally honest. But he is up top and he will start. So if you want to go ahead with it, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if he bagged. But I feel like you should focus on more Sunderland keeping a clean sheet or their midfield contributions, and obviously scoring from midfield is a lot more effective, so you can just allow yourself to play those free attacking players up top. And I will say it, you know, call it stupid, call it naive or whatever, but I'm going in there and I'm continuing to play Joao Pedro up top. I think if you don't have him, this is the week that you put him in and he starts to bag. Because if it doesn't happen this week, I am very worried for his season. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I feel like just a quick recap of the Premier League this season. Obviously, a little late one for me is come home from work, sit down, spitball all of my brain power to you lot, and just chop it up with the man himself. But yeah, God bless. Take care of yourself. Fucking Jesus gang and up the Chelsea.